So, welcome everyone. I'm Alexander Mihalja, and today we're joined by Oliver Helvin, Managing Director of JRH Partners. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for the invite. Looking forward to today very much.
Before we dive in, could you give us a quick overview of what JRH Partners does?
Absolutely. So JRH Partners is a executive search firm based here in the Middle East, but we do executive placements across Middle East Africa, but we will identify talent from any location globally and help them relocate to this region. We're predominantly focused within your investments, fintech, family offices, and other sort of asset management type businesses. And ultimately from our side, we've enjoyed building out our different suite of products. So we have psychometrics, we have executive search contingent. We bring AI into that as well, which is some of the things we'll discuss today. And ultimately, that's enabled us to give our customers a much more data-driven approach to enable them to hire faster. So yeah, that's us in a nutshell.
That's fascinating. And what inspired you to create JRH Partners? Was there a specific moment or experience that sparked this journey?
So yeah, very quickly, my background, I actually started as an engineer. Over time, it started a career. So then over time moved into headhunting, did that in the UK, then moved out to the Middle East 15, 16 years ago. Worked on the agency side, as you would call it, but then worked in-house for a number of years for companies heading up their recruitment functions. And then during that time saw things that worked and didn't, things that I thought were very good within the market in recruitment, especially in the Middle East, and things that there were gaps. And so ultimately the opportunity was presented with JRH Partners to come and help grow something that was much more people-centric, that was enabled to be a bit more nimble and ultimately provide customers with a very high level of service. And so it was more a desire to help fill in a gap I felt that was there in the market from a service level offering. So that's very much what drove the business growth.
Okay, so let's go back to when you first started. What major challenges or gaps did you see in the market that made you think this needs to be solved?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenges I felt was more around the market being very focused on price because they hadn't understood what a quality solution would look like. And so it was more about discussing the additional services that we put in place, our team structure, our tech stack, the data providers we use, all of this other extra info that would mean that they would understand they were getting a much broader and deeper insight into the actual talent pool. So they were able to make much more informed decisions. So what I felt was there's a number of firms that would just say, here's a few CVs, take it or leave it. And the client was never sure if they were getting the right candidate or the right service. Whereas if we were able to make it more of a customer centric partnership, they would ultimately be able to be much more sure about the final decision that they were taking. So they would not only like the candidate, but they would be sure how that candidate stacked up in the market and enable them to make a better decision. So for us, it was that customer centric part. That's what we felt was missing. And that's what we've always focused on and tried to develop and continue to develop as we go.
Right. So that's interesting. And could you elaborate on why the existing solution weren't meeting these needs?
I think it's probably very similar to what I was saying before. I think it was. I think maybe it's potentially people in the Middle East hadn't come from industry and then in-house, and so hadn't experienced the solution from the other side of the fence. And so I think they were doing it more transactional. My experience of being on both sides of the fence had enabled me to see when that was applicable and when it wasn't, and where those gaps were. So I think it was a little bit more down to myself seeing what worked and what didn't, so the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then being able to hone in on those gaps myself, and then obviously help the team grow from there and our solutions and focus. So yeah, I think that was probably the key differentiator in what we were trying to achieve.
Okay, and what was the breaking point that made you decide to tackle this problem?
I'm not sure there was one specific moment. I think it was more down to the firm I was at the time. We had gone into new markets. We'd established. So when I was still in-house, so we'd gone into new markets. We'd established, and we were in a kind of, there's going to be no growth within that firm that I was head of recruitment for the next number of years. They'd grown. They were just consolidating. And so for me, it was more, this seemed like a very good time from a personal challenge perspective to take something on and try and fix some of those problems, because I didn't feel like there was going to be any personal growth for the coming years, because we kind of put all the steps in place. We'd gone to new markets. The business now is kind of ticking along. There was no key senior hires to be made for that organization. It was just a few replacements and so on. So going back to this side of the fence on the agency side and really kind of understanding where those, explain to clients where the gaps were and how things could be different. That's really what kind of appealed to me. I think it was a timing thing. And I mean, that's what, I'm sure some of your listeners will see, whether you're an employee moving, whether you're a founder starting a new business. I think timing is everything. And it may not be one exact moment that makes you do something, but I think it's an over time feeling and growth that you think, right, it gets to a point, it's a kind of a now or never. I do it or I don't. And I think there was I should do this, otherwise I'll be here in 3-4 years time and nothing will be different. That was kind of the mindset for me.
All right, so walk us through how your partners addresses these challenges. What makes your approach unique?
So for us, the uniqueness, I think, goes back to the data that we will bring into this. So we have our team-based approach across our tech stack, and then also we integrate AI into that. We've also done AI with our own solution. So I think very importantly, there are a number of solutions out there, but for me, they don't really provide the right level of depth and insight. So we have psychometric insights, we have team assessment insights, we have then the market map data insights, and ultimately between our team, our networks, our process, and AI, we're able to give the clients very high level and detailed client dashboards. So that helps them with the decision making. We're then able to bring in those candidate insights as well, not only from our assessments, but also, like we said, some of these assessment tools. So the client really can then see where they might stand. And I think within crypto and fintech and so on, that's really important because the background of candidates has changed, or is changing, I should say. And so, they don't always come from a really obvious background. And I think if you only have one approach, you're only going to provide your clients with just one type of CV. And I think, gone are the days where you only come from traditional banking. You can come from many different industries now and feed into this sector. And so you need to be aware where to look, how to look, and then how to assess, and then ultimately how to fairly assess candidates from different backgrounds so that they can be assessed sort of together, as it were. So the client has that overview. So for us, that's a bit of the uniqueness, and the approach is the trying to give that diversity of shortlist to the client that ultimately drives them to better hiring solutions. So yes.
Okay, and I have a curiosity by this. So, how has the rise of the Web3 and cryptocurrency affected the type of talent companies are looking for?
So I think, you can look at, there's been a real shift in terms of, I think more of a shift towards candidates with a decent compliance background, because I think it's gone are the days where the industry itself has matured more. And so I think there is a shift in terms of even to legal and regulatory experts having to come in and work with those frameworks. There are whether you are on the product side, the data side, the technology side, you are looking at how does this innovation work within a compliance framework. And I think that's the biggest change that we've seen is there are some specific things as to whether a client is at a certain round of funding, a certain size, and all these other aspects. But ultimately, overall, riding is that compliance legal framework background. And that doesn't mean they're only hiring legal candidates, but I mean, even someone from a CTO, they're still having to have that slightly different mindset than maybe they had to 5 years ago. So I think that's been what I've seen is a bigger demand from clients, and that's partly maturity of the market, partly regulatory, and partly I just think a natural evolution of how a sector grows. But that's been a key thing for sure.
Okay, and what unique challenges do cryptocurrency and fintech companies face when building their teams?
In terms of building the teams, I think there's a few things. You may be up against big tech, so that can be a compensation element. But then a really big thing that needs to be focused on is what is your mission, vision, statement offering? What is it that makes your product, your company, your culture unique? And I think there needs to be some really good focus on that, especially as some of your workers might be remote. There needs to be a very clear what makes us different, how have we structured our pay, our compensation, what about us is very different. And then ultimately, within that, I think you're getting those those companies that are able to then make decisions quickly, because candidates do have options. The market is quick and moving, but I think and that's where someone like ourselves comes in with providing you with a fast service, but B, data so that you can be sure when you speak to the right person that they are the right person. And I think it's a combination of all those things that really is the challenge for these organizations, is trying to stand out. And I think it's therefore having the right sort of leaders and mentorship from their side, that you can develop your staff in terms of a career, that you can develop them in terms of compensation, and then that all feeds into your employee brand. And I think it's even more important in a startup that's growing. You can't just simply say, "Oh, we'll get round to that later," because you might miss the opportunity to hire that fantastic person who changes your business. They're for me the key things. Yeah.
Right. So when you talk to potential clients, what's the biggest misconception they typically have about what you do?
I think client misconception is that there is potentially a magic pool of people that are sat there desperately waiting for a role, whereas that top talent, they are not desperately sat there and waiting. We may know of some of them from our network, the work that we do. We're constantly speaking to candidates. There might be some candidates that we specifically headhunt for them that are for the first time. But either way, the importance is that each search is unique. There will be no two CTOs that are exactly the same. And I think that's sometimes the misconception from a client, is to say, "Oh, you do this day in day out. I'm sure there must be, just a number of people you can send me this afternoon." It doesn't quite work like that, because you need to obviously give the correct care and attention, but also you need to be very specific in their needs. And I think that's what went back to my earlier statements of what I found was missing in the recruitment space, was people would just say, "Oh, this guy works as the same job title in a similar firm. I'm just going to send him. I don't care." Versus, no, you need to go deeper than that. You need to have done the cultural assessments. You need to have had those proper conversations. You need to have gone through all those other aspects. What is their motivations and drivers? So I think that's the bit on the client, is it's the education piece to show them you'll get a much better process. And it doesn't mean that process takes a super long time, but you will get a much better process if you work with, don't give this to four companies. We won't go down that approach. Give this to us exclusively. We'll then be doing our positioning. Some of our clients, we have exclusive mandates with for all of their recruitment and so on. And this enables you to be a partner. This enables you to have data discussions. This enables you to say, if you have to be flexible in A, B, C, these are the reasons why. These are the people you could look at. And then the pressure is more on the person, not the speed of process. And I mean, that's the key, is enable your talent partner to focus on your talent and your brand, not just simply the speed they operate, because the only way to do that is forcing them to cut corners, which ultimately is the degradation of the type of profiles you will be reviewing for your hire. So I think it's, yes, hire quick, but not so quick that you're not taking the time and care to actually look at the market. So it's getting that balance right. That's the key.
Right. So now, looking at the broader industry, what key trends are you seeing emerge?
I think in terms of key trends, it depends where you're looking at. If you're looking at, say, the Middle East, obviously we're at a different growth stage. We're kind of more in a sort of foundational growth stage compared to sort of the US and Europe. And so, but also we don't have some of the legacy infrastructure here. So we are able to adopt some of these technologies faster. There is a big government support on that. So, in Saudi Arabia, the 2030 vision and things. So there's a lot of capital and regulatory support. The PE and VC space here is growing extremely quickly. So there is that appetite to help the countries grow. So I think the challenges for us is potentially that there is less established talent with many years of experience on the ground due to it's newer here. I think that's probably the bit. And so then when clients are having to look internationally to relocate talent, that's when again we go back to their need for being really strong on their branding, really strong on their integration of a candidate once they're selected and brought in. That's the stuff that is really key, because potentially you might have somebody remote, potentially you might be relocating them, but either way, yes, some people will come from the local market, but you will be moving people internationally. And I think that's really key in terms of the growth part there. So I think that's it. It's the growth of the ecosystem and where we are from a maturity standpoint. Yeah.
Okay, and for example, what are the most significant shifts you're seeing in talent acquisition within the cryptocurrency and fintech sectors?
I think it's twofold, and we touched on this partly earlier. It's definitely down to compliance. It's down to data, of course, as you would expect. But I think then it's the types of roles within that we're seeing. So we're seeing specific roles within a compliance or a data background that are really pushing. I think we're seeing as businesses move through their funding rounds as well, the types of profiles that they're wanting. So the more earlier stage are very much around a generalist. The roles are a little bit more generalist because you have to roll your sleeves up. You have to grow with the business, as it were. But then as you move further through the funding rounds, that's when we're seeing a real shift into the more the bigger need for more established, mature clients. So, for example, maybe a CFO that's got an IPO background, a CTO from a specific sort of background, and those are kind of some of those shifts that I think. But then it really then plays into hiring for the talent that is able to then bring the business forward. And I think it's that bit where founders are, very few founders will take a business from inception all the way through to, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. It's at what point does that founder step back? At what point do they really change the C-suites into a true C-suite? And it's something we were talking about beforehand. If you look at, say, Daniel Priestley is a well-known presenter, he talks about as you're growing a business, and it's, the scalability. You've got, you grow from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 16 to 32, but it's almost a doubling effect keeps happening. And I think what we see with these businesses is they get to a certain stage, and then, maybe there's 64 people, and they think, right, okay, I'm just going to slowly continue to grow. No, there's a point where you need to make a real conscious decision of structurally the business will change, and we need to make a huge hiring step. So you will almost double the business overnight. And I think that's the bits that are a real shift in mindset that we see. So it's more as the business is mature. That's, I think, the biggest thing. So it's a kind of founder mindset together with the funding rounds, together with the scalability. It's structurally bringing in the correct C-suite to do that. And that's, again, part of, I think, where we assist our clients. We can also help them in terms of, reviews of the talent you have in place. So we can go into businesses and say, right, let's sit down and do reviews of your senior leadership. Let's explain, at the end of that, we'll give you reports to say where they are lacking in certain areas, where you need to maybe train them up, where you need to maybe move them into another space. If you move from structure A to structure B, this is a role you've got missing, or this candidate, you want to move them into this new position. Those are the key things. So it's the structural piece, I think, is really key for clients in terms of a challenge to continue to scale.
And how has the maturity of different markets, particularly comparing with Middle East to other regions, affecting hiring trends?
I think it's really around the willingness of organizations to be more open to different backgrounds. And I think that's the key bit is the less mature your market is, the more you probably want somebody who's maybe come from traditional banking. But are you, open to those different backgrounds? And I think it's, for me, that's been a really key sort of difference is as the level of maturity grows, the ability to expand that talent pool grows, and the businesses that are able to be forward thinkers, they're the ones that grow faster. And so I think it's having that balance where you are still bringing in people with good experience, but from potentially different industries versus A, no flexibility, or B, we'll take anyone from anywhere, we'll just hire for attitude. There's getting that balance. It's important to have the right attitude, but if they don't come with a certain set of skills, you're being too flexible in a way. So it's getting that balance. Yeah. The balance is the key.
Right. And how do you see the relationship between traditional finance talent and cryptocurrency expertise evolving?
I think it's going to come down to those leaders that are able to be adaptive. I mean, that sounds obvious, but I think there is fundamentally people that will shine towards this. Fundamentally, you're already seeing it. There are some candidates that will never be open to make that transition, and some that really are. And so I think it is more traditionally you would see someone that has been only ever in traditional banking and gone up a very rigid background. They're the ones that are less flexible you'd find. because they're only used to one way. So I think it's, if the candidate in traditional banking has maybe tried a few different product lines or come up a slightly different route, or maybe they came from a different background and then got into banking, they're the ones that will generally be quite adaptable to a fintech crypto background. But the ones that have maybe, gone to Harvard, maybe gone down, a middle office product route in tax and audit and all of this stuff, they're never, well, never say never, but it's very unlikely that they will want to or be able to make that transition, because they themselves are probably a very different personality. So it's the personality bit, and that comes back into assessing the candidates on a personality standpoint to see who enjoys the adaptability to change, because some people just love structure, and so they will stay in traditional, and that's absolutely fine. But the people that like a little bit more innovation or chaos, let's say, they need to be assessed on a psychometric level as well, not just simply background or screening conversations, but that personality side as well, to say, yes, this person has speed and adaptability to change. There are a number of assessments around that. Predictive learning indicators is one. That is very much a speed, adaptability, and accuracy. Basically, all of that comes together to your ability to adapt to change, and those are used by organizations to give them quite a reasonable indicator of people that are moving, good to move. Yeah.
Also, what advice would you give to companies looking to build strong cryptocurrency and fintech teams?
It's probably a little bit of all of the bits that we've discussed. I think it's whether you're doing all with a external partner like ourselves, whether you're doing a blend of yourselves and an external partner, don't just hire the first person you see. So, I've known this guy for 20 years, or, he's been recommended by a friend or something. There's a little bit of that goes on, which can maybe work when you're 1, 2, 3, 4 people. But beyond that, you need to move into a very structured hiring process. That can still be very quick, but I think it is using data to make your hiring decisions. It is being very clear on what your mission statement is, and, whether you're the best payer, the worst payer, sitting in the middle, whatever it might be, being able to link that to why a candidate would want to join you guys and all of that. I think also not forgetting that culture is really key. And so, if you have a blend of international talent, local talent, remote talent, traditional banking, technology, maybe some from fintech, have you still got people that are adaptable to change, that work in a collaborative way? There's no point having, a bunch of mavericks that are all kind of fighting against each other. And I think it sounds obvious, but I think where it's a newer sector, people sometimes just focus on, I have a problem, this guy can solve it, I'm sure that'll work out, versus he might be a good hire technically, but if he's not a good cultural fit, he will cause you more problems in the long run, or he or she, I should say. And so I think that's the really key bit, is not forgetting the cultural piece, and therefore linking it to your talent brand, therefore linking it to, don't just hire the first person that comes along that's been recommended by your friend, do have that overview, and so on and so forth. So it's a little bit of all of those things that come together. Yeah.
As you wrap up, what's next for JRH Partners? Any exciting developments on the horizon?
Yeah, so for us, as we mentioned, we've had our psychometrics and everything running for a long time and helping clients. What we have done is upgraded our AI solutions and data dashboards and data sets. So this is all literally in the next couple of weeks going 100% live. At the minute, it's running behind the scenes, and the team are making sure there's no bugs in it. So we've pulled together a number of different tools, over 100 different data providers, a number of different outreach tools, and all of this has come together for us to be able to offer clients a extremely data-driven, robust solution, which just simply builds on what we've had before. So you have our traditional services, which are all fantastic. One-off niche role that you have will come in and do a fantastic job and be able to give you even more insights. But we're also going to be able to offer clients for more traditional roles, a kind of monthly RPO type service to them, where they'll be able to use us as a sole provider at a different kind of rate and things. So there's definitely conversations we'd love to have with clients around, if you're growing at a certain level or you have a certain need, we'll be able to offer you something that will enable you to, not need to go hire a big internal team or scale them up further. You'll be able to utilize us as an outside partner together with AI to give you some really great insights. But overall, it's us, embracing that technology piece to further enhance the assessments further enhance how candidates are evaluated. And, like we said, whether it's your junior member of staff up to your C-suite, ultimately, we want to be able to find you that diversity of shortlist. And that's all the bits we've been covering today. I think it's that you need to be using the human hybrid AI coming together with a number of different data providers to really give everyone that insight that there's a really informed decision to be made by all. So yeah, that's where we're going. It's exciting.
Great, that's awesome. And for listeners who want to learn more or potentially work with JRH Partners, what's the best way to get in touch?
So definitely look us up on LinkedIn so you can see a little bit more about myself. So Oliver Helvin, JRH Partners. You can go onto our website, jrhpartners.com. There's free psychometrics you can do on there as well. You can see some of the podcasts that we've done. We have a leadership podcast as well, so you can see some of those interviews and ultimately comment on the video itself. So, and on our website, there's a contact us form as well and everything. So there's a number of different ways: LinkedIn, company page, the website, our YouTube channel, our psychometrics. There's a number of things that you can look at and touch and feel. There's interview guides, salary guides that are free to download for individuals as well, and things on those websites. So there's a lot of assets that they can look at, and then obviously they can reach out if they want to, as a candidate or obviously as a client for further discussion. We'd welcome that for sure, and yeah, look forward to it.
Perfect. So thank you for sharing those insights about you, about your company, and about the whole story. And thank you for this amazing podcast session.
No, thank you so much for the invite, and I hope your listeners enjoyed it. And yeah, thanks again for your time. Cheers.
Great. So see you in the next episode. Bye.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. Cheers.